In the 3,000 years of Chinese history, dozens of dynasties have risen and fallen, but only one can be called the ultimate. Forget everything you know about ancient empires. We are not talking about a standard dynasty. We are talking about the absolute peak of agricultural civilization. We're talking about the highest peak of ancient globalization. Historians simply call it the apex. This is the Tang Dynasty. While Rome had already crumbled into ruins and European knights were fighting in the mud, the Tang had established a super empire stretching from the Korean peninsula to Afghanistan. Its capital, Chang'an, was the only world capital on Earth at the time. Its volume was double that of the Roman Empire. Its openness would put even modern nations to shame. If an alien civilization had observed Earth at that moment, they would have concluded that there was only one civilized nation on the planet, and the rest were merely tribes. This was not just an empire. In that dark century, it was humanity's only backup server. But this dizzying greatness did not appear out of thin air. It began with a cold-blooded murder that violated every moral code. To understand the light of the Tang, we must first look directly at its darkest original sin. Let's rewind to the summer of 626. The creator of this super empire, Li Shimin, was facing the defining moment of his life and of history itself. Before this day, he was the empire's god of war. He enlisted at 16 and took command of the entire military by 20, sweeping away every warlord standing in the way. But after this day, he would become known as a usurper who killed his brothers and coerced his father. The situation was simple. According to tradition, the throne belonged to his older brother, the crown prince. The crown prince had laid a trap to eliminate Li Shimin on his way to court the next morning. Li Shimin had two choices: die obediently by the rules, or carve a bloody path to survive. He chose the latter. In the pre-dawn darkness of July 2nd, at the Xuanwu Gate, there were no speeches. There was no trial. Li Shimin personally led the ambush and personally pulled the trigger. A sharp arrow pierced the air and went straight through his brother's throat. Immediately after, his generals purged all remaining rivals. In a matter of minutes, every obstacle was physically removed. Covered in blood that had not yet dried, Li Shimin walked into the deep palace to stare down his own father, the founding emperor. It was a silent coup. The old emperor looked at the son who had just killed his brothers, the only son capable of holding the empire together, and was forced to abdicate. This is the foundation of the Tang Golden Age. It was poured with blood, but it was precisely this original sin that created the greatness that followed. Because for the rest of his life, Li Shimin was driven by a frantic psychology of redemption. He was terrified that history would write him down as a tyrant. So, he had to be more diligent than anyone, more tolerant than anyone. He had to create a golden age unprecedented in history to prove one thing: that the bloodshed that morning was not in vain. The blood of Xuanwu Gate eventually turned into the rains that nourished the Golden Age. Li Shimin's path to redemption began with building an invincible army. The Tang became a superpower first, thanks to a massive hardware generational advantage. Look at this weapon, the Tang Blade, or Tang Dao. It is the direct ancestor of the Japanese katana, but even more deadly. It used the cutting-edge steel cladding tech back then. Hard iron on the surface, flexible steel at the core. This allowed it to split enemy armor without snapping. Then, look at this armor, the Mingguang armor, or bright light armor. Its two mirror-polished chest plates blazed in the sun on the battlefield. When thousands of Tang soldiers lined up, that wall of blinding light was a terrifying psychological weapon. But the most frightening thing about this army wasn't its gear. It was its dual-core drive system. First, the militia system. This was a genius economic model. Soldiers were farmers who owned land. They trained in their spare time. When war came, they brought their own horses, weapons, and grain. The state didn't need to spend massive funds to maintain a standing army, yet could mobilize hundreds of thousands at any moment. The other core was the fusion of tactics. In the year 630, the moment for revenge arrived. To wash away the shame of a previous Turkic invasion, the Tang god of war, General Li Jing, led a northern expedition. It was a brutally cold winter, and blizzards ravaged the steppe. The Turks believed the Tang army would never attack in such weather. Li Jing made a crazy decision. He left the main army and supplies behind, leading just 3,000 elite cavalrymen. Like ghosts, they cut through the blizzard and unleashed a blitzkrieg on the Turkic headquarters. The Turks collapsed completely. They had no idea how many Tang soldiers were actually there. The invincible Eastern Turkic Khaganate was dismantled by a precise surgical strike. But Li Shimin's greatest moment was the choice he made after the victory. He didn't commit genocide. He didn't build walls. He invited Turkic generals to Chang'an as officials and allowed Turkic tribes to settle along the border. Li Jing's thunderous attack crushed the steppe tribes. But Li Shimin's tolerance won their loyalty. The nomadic tribes were so won over that they offered him a title never before held by a Chinese emperor, the Heavenly Khan. This meant the Tang Dynasty possessed both the administrative brain of an agricultural civilization and the military muscle of a nomadic civilization. This dual-core monster was ready to show its power to the world. This confidence created the first supermetropolis in human history, Chang'an. In the 7th century, London was a muddy village. Chang'an held 1 million people inside its walls, and nearly 3 million with suburbs included. It was the largest human settlement on Earth. Its central axis, Juke Avenue, was 150 meters wide enough for a dozen horses to gallop side by side. It is nearly double the width of New York's Fifth Avenue today. It was not just big, it was precise. Chang'an was divided into 108 wards, like a giant integrated circuit board. Each ward had walls and independent management systems. But what really made the city run was the Tang Code. This legal code was incredibly rigorous. It defined the rights and obligations of every foreign merchant. For example, the law explicitly stated if foreigners harmed their own people, they'd be tried under their own laws. But if people of different nationalities fought, they must be judged by Tang law. This rule of law made Chang'an the safest trade hub on Earth. This sense of security extended along the thousands of miles of the Silk Road. Let's look at an incredible story to prove the power of a Tang envoy's credentials. Wang Xuanze was an ordinary Tang diplomat. In the year 648, he was sent to India. Just as he arrived, a coup occurred. The new king not only robbed the delegation, but killed the attendants. Wang Xuanze barely escaped. He didn't go back to China for troops. It was too far. Instead, relying solely on his identity as a Tang envoy, he went to nearby Nepal and Tibet. He told the local kings, "I am an envoy of the great Tang. I need to borrow troops for revenge." That was enough. Wang Xuanze's leverage came from the Tang's prestige across Central Asia. The kingdoms lent him troops not because of his personal ability, but because they feared the power of the empire behind him. With a makeshift multinational force of 8,000 men, he stormed back into India. In just 3 days, he crushed the rebel army, breached the capital, and captured the usurper king, hauling him back to Chang'an in a cage, all the way from India. One man destroying a nation. It sounds like a myth, but it is a true reflection of the Tang at its peak. In this world, no one dared to touch a Tang envoy, because every nation knew that the Tang's thunder would follow. The greatness of the Tang lay not only in external conquest, but in internal revolution. It launched a game-changing system, the imperial examination known as Keiju. In Europe, noble bloodlines determined everything. But in the Tang, this class breaker was running at full speed. The exams were brutal, but incredibly valuable. As the saying went, 30 is too old to pass the basic exam, but 50 is still young to ace the top-tier Jinshi exam. This was not just a test, it was a revolution. For the first time ever, bloodline privilege was crushed by merit. Countless poor scholars crossed this narrow path to become prime ministers and generals. It was this constant upward flow of fresh blood that kept the Tang vibrant for over a century. This vitality also brought a freedom rare in ancient history. Look at the women of the Tang. Forget the stereotype of foot binding. That happened centuries later. Tang women wore men's outfits to ride horses and hunt, and rocked low-cut dresses to banquets. We even find a woman named Shangguan, who was Empress Wu Zetian's top advisor and effectively a female prime minister with enormous power. In divorce agreements found in the Dunhuang caves, we read words like, "After we part, may you fix your hair and look your best once more. Part ways, and both find joy." This kind of dignified free divorce was a millennium ahead of the West. It was this soil that gave birth to Li Bai, the rock star of the era. He sipped wine from Persian traders and penned bold, unrestrained poems. Even when the emperor wanted a poem, Li Bai dared to make the most powerful eunuch, Gao Lychee, take off his boots. This pride, this refusal to bow to power, could only survive in the Tang. It was an era where talent alone let you reach for the stars. But history's unwritten rule is clear. Great prosperity always leads to decline. The collapse of the Tang was not because it was weak, but because it was too confident and too extravagant. Let's look at the famous Lychee Express. The Tang established a postal relay system covering the entire empire. This was the empire's neural network for military intel, the exact reason Wang Xuanze could borrow troops so easily. But in its later years, this system rotted. To ensure his beloved concubine, Yang Guifei, could eat fresh lychees from the south, Emperor Xuanzong ordered the highest-level military express horses to run day and night, wearing out countless horses just to make her smile. This isn't just a love story. It is a signal of systemic corruption. When an empire's lifeline is wasted on luxury goods, its days are numbered. The aging emperor was confident enough to think he could manage any risk. He handed over half the empire's military power to a foreign general named An Lushan. This 300-pound warlord played the fool, dancing for the emperor to make everyone think he was just a loyal buffoon. This extreme political naivety turned openness into a disregard for danger. The ending was inevitable, the Maui Slope incident. This was not a simple rebellion. It was the ultimate human tragedy. As they fled the capital, the furious imperial guards cornered the emperor. They demanded the execution of Yang Guifei, or they would refuse to protect him. The emperor was forced to choose between his empire and the love of his life. he had no choice but to order her execution by strangulation. In that moment, the romantic, luxurious, and naive adolescence of the Tang Dynasty ended completely. But the real hell was yet to come. The An Lushan Rebellion gutted the empire to its core. The imperial examination became a tool for the rich, cutting off the only upward path for commoners. A monster was born from this broken system. A scholar named Huang Chao failed the exams repeatedly. Enraged, he wrote a violent poem vowing, "The whole city will be draped in golden armor." Years later, this failed student became a destroyer. His rebel army captured Chang'an. The once great center of the world became a living hell. The prosperous streets were burned to scorched earth, and cannibalism ran rampant in the same neighborhoods where poets once recited verses. The Empire of Light, once inclusive and confident, was physically destroyed by a monster of its own making. The Tang Dynasty physically died in the year 907. Tibetans seized control of the Silk Road, and military warlords split off to rule their own lands. Openness turned into xenophobia, but spiritually, it never died. To this day, Chinese communities across the globe call their homes Chinatown, the street of the Tang people, not the street of the Han or Song. Why? Because that era represents the most confident, open, and brilliant memory of Chinese civilization. It proved a civilization's true strength lies not in how high its walls are, but how wide its doors open. The Tang Dynasty is that glorious dream we can never return to. What is the most dazzling moment of the Tang for you? Is it the iron cavalry of Li Jing or the wild songs of Li Bai? Tell me in the comments.